is the museum I work for. It's the Penn Museum, that big name, the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, one of the biggest names for a museum. Now, we call ourselves the Penn Museum for short. We're located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and our goal is when you come to the museum, and I can't wait because I know one day all of us will be able to explore this museum together. We actually have objects from all over the world, and our goal is really to make sure that we can preserve the history of these objects so that people can continue to learn from them, and we can understand how we're similar and different from people that were living thousands of years ago, and also to celebrate the world cultures that are very alive today, right? Now, our big goal in doing this is making sure that our global collection, right? We have archaeologists and anthropologists that we work with that help us go all over the world in those big digs. Now, in some cases, guys, I'm not going to lie to you, we do actually have human remains, okay? Now, we are going to be talking about ancient Egyptian mummies today. So I'm going to show you pictures from mummies. Now, just a reminder, mummies, and I can tell you this because I work in the museum, and when I was allowed to be on site there before COVID, we actually would have events at night. So I can tell you, mummies, they don't come back to life. Instead, mummies were just actually people that were living once, and then that like thousands of years ago. And so we respect them the same way as if they would, the same way we would respect anybody that was living today. Now, mummies are that we're going to be speaking about, because we have mummies from all over the world. Our goal is to connect to ancient Egyptian mummification. So really quick, guys, I just gave this out. I know that you guys came out of another program. So can you tell me in that chat box, remind me, what continent is Egypt located? And if you remember the continent, tell me, is it on the top, the side, below? Tell me in that chat box. What continent is Egypt located? And if you want to push it a little further, tell me where, give me some north, south, east, west. Good job, Aaron. Good job, Gabriella. Africa, awesome, awesome. So we're in the top part of Africa, Northern Africa, right here. I kind of call it the Northeast Africa of the continent. That's where Egypt was thousands of years ago. And guess what, guys? That's where we could all go visit Egypt today. So one team of archaeologists who just study ancient Egypt, they actually get on a plane. About 14 hours later, they find themselves, and typically that plane lands in Cairo, okay? It's about a 14-hour journey. Now, what do you guys think? Really, really quick, tell me, and you guys will already definitely be able to answer this. Do you think modern Egyptians mummify their dead? Now, when I say modern Egyptians, I mean that city we can go and visit, like Miss Mally talked to you about and her awesome experience and all of the wonderful, wonderful fashion. Yes, no way, nope, nope, no, no, no. Good job, guys. No way. We are talking about an ancient practice, right? So this is not something that's happening in Egypt today or around the world today. Instead, we could actually talk a little bit about how some funeral homes, they actually practice embalming, but not in the same fashion or for the same reasons, right? The goal is that they're trying to remove the water so that they can preserve that body. Good question. So Gabriella said, why don't they still do it? Well, that is a great question. Now, mummification is a belief, is part of the ancient Egyptians' belief system. So the whole process we're going to walk through today had a very big connection to their gods and their beliefs specifically into your life after your time on earth, what they called their afterlife. So that after about 30 BCE, and as we move into the modern era, the common era, so the centuries we're living in today, that practice isn't something that's kept up, that belief system, probably because people start living together in what's called cultural diffusion. And so that practice went out. But what they do is the goal though is still to preserve the body through more science and different types of material. Really, really good question, Gabriella. Okay, now if we all went to Egypt today, you would be able to hang out in this modern city. This is a mosque here, so this is an area and a connection to their culture, their beliefs today. Lots of the individuals that are living there's beliefs today. They would go into school. I've showed you guys this picture before because I know somebody that has some pretty cool fashion that looks like this. Miss Nally showed us last time. And then also, guys, remember, if you go to Egypt, you might even be able to see some of your favorite stores or some of the favorite places to eat that are in your communities as well. Now, I wanted to specifically talk about ancient Egyptians, right? We're going to jump back into time. We're all living right here in 2020, but our story is going to try to trace this 3,270 years of ancient Egyptian histories by taking a close look at mummies, okay, and how that whole process has really moved forward over that time period. Now, I know you guys wanted to talk about ancient Egyptian gods last time we met, so I'm really excited to be talking about ancient Egyptian gods to start our story on mummification. But before that, before we jump in, let's really quickly remind ourselves of where we are. So we know we're in Africa, the top or the north part of Africa. All together in that chat box, tell me, what's the name of this green blue line that we've kind of zoomed into here? What's the name of this green blue line represented on my map here? Good job, the Nile River, absolutely. That's our main water source, guys. Ancient Egyptians had lots of beliefs in connection to the Nile River. And also it reminds us by looking at those cities and villages, if you were located by the Nile River, you would actually be able to kind of grow your crops to harvest. That means you were able to feed more and more people. And that's what you really wanted. You wanted to grow your population. Now, what about that sand? I just gave it to you guys. This is the desert. It's a sand color because it represents sand. Now, I think I shared with you guys before, but if we were actually on a dig right now, it's about 12 p.m. where I am, Eastern Standard Time. And our day would kind of be over if we all went to excavate in Egypt. That's because the sun can get so high that it'll become too hot to be there. So hot that I have actually seen the thermometer go up to 140 degrees. So it's extremely hot, okay? So we know where we are. We know more about this environment, right? The desert environment being really hot and dry and arid. Now, let's shift gears into talking about mummification and ancient Egyptian life. So really quick, guys, can you tell me in that chat box, can you name a couple topics that you guys know about or have discussed in relationship to ancient Egypt? It doesn't have to just be about mummies. And if you want to, you can also maybe name some of the Egyptian gods you might already know a little bit about. And that way we can see if I can bring them up in our conversation. Yes. Okay. So King Tut is a really big one. I love that you guys talked about that. I heard it was so fun. And I also have a friend that actually was in King Tut's tomb as well and got to see some of the CAT scans about his foot. He had a really bad tooth that had an infection on it. It's called an abscess. And also a little bit more about how he had a really bad injury on his top leg. And you guys talked about the Sphinx. I love it. I miss our Sphinx so much. We have a Sphinx in our collection. It is exciting about that mythical beast. Love it. So you guys talked about pharaohs. Oh, and we saw the CT video. Great. I love that. Okay. So wonderful. You guys talked a lot about different pharaohs. You talked about different, specifically in power. You talked about the Sphinx. So those Sphinx you can actually see today if you went to Egypt. Actually, guys, check it out. Right here, you can see a Sphinx right through that Pizza Hut window. It's very interesting. So you can see the Sphinx. All of these are really great conversations. Now, I always like to remind everybody, because we're talking about ancient Egyptians and we talked about their modern city, that ancient Egyptians really aren't that different from you and I, right? That they woke up every single day. They had families, they had friends, they had communities, they had responsibilities. And those responsibilities changed based on where they found themselves in their lives, but they also had this connected belief system. And that's where this mummification process that we're going to talk about fits in. Okay, so first, who can tell me, who is this guy? His name is Osiris. You can see the name down here, but this is a specific Egyptian god. Does anyone want to give me a suggestion in the chat box? What's Osiris's job? Tell me a little bit about his purpose or his story as this important god or goddess. Okay, so he's a god. Good job. What's his job as a god? Does anyone know? It's okay if you don't, but I always like to ask. Okay, so god of war, that's a good suggestion. God of the afterlife, farming, very good. Good job, guys. So our suggestions are that this is definitely a god. So you're 100% correct. We also have the idea that is this a god of war? Is this a god of the afterlife? Or is this a god of farming? And honestly, you all kind of have the right answer because he kind of connects to all of them, right? So this is Osiris, and we're going to talk about his story. He is one of the most important gods, right? Because of that connection. Well, not one of the most important gods. I don't want anybody mad at me, but he is definitely a significant god when it comes to the idea of the afterlife and the story of mummification. Now, the reason I love that you guys also brought up war and the idea of farming is because with these two symbols, you see Osiris holding the crook and the flail. These represent, this symbol is something you actually connect with, and any pharaoh will actually be depicted with or shown with. Okay, drawn with, or a statue made out of. That's because these two objects represent something to the ancient Egyptians. Now, remember, in ancient Egypt, not everybody's able to read and write like we are today. Most of us are today, right? Instead, they would use images for communication, especially when it came to gods and people in power like the pharaohs. So you have special headdress for our pharaohs. We actually see a headdress right here on Osiris as well. Now, this crook and this flail represent the idea, not so much of war, but of protection. That the Osiris is definitely, and the pharaohs are definitely going to be protecting their people. And right here, the flail, that is a connection to farming, right? Like we said before, you need to keep growing that steady food supply to make sure you can grow your population. So he's saying, don't worry, I'm always going to make sure you're protected and you have food. Those are things that you really want out of a leader. So let's talk a little bit about Osiris's story. Osiris here, he specifically was, they say, a king of the king. He was in charge, kind of like let's say he would kind of be like the first pharaoh, okay? Now, he had this brother, Set. Does anybody here have brothers or sisters? You can say, I do. If you want to, you can name how many you have. I'm the middle of two sisters. So I have an older sister and I have a younger sister, but my daughter, she is my only child. So she doesn't have any siblings. Okay, cool. So some of you guys are just like my daughter, Sienna. She doesn't have any siblings either. And some of you guys have an older brother. Oh, 4 sisters. That is so cool, Charlie and AJ. That's exciting. You guys probably gonna have lots of fun. So some of you guys might be familiar. Some of you guys that have shared that you have family, you have siblings might be familiar with some sibling rivalry. Or for my daughter, she always has a fun kind of back and forth with her cousin who's really close in age to her. So the idea is that Osiris and Set, they kind of always had this sibling rivalry, right? And Set always kind of wanted to be in charge. So even though Osiris was in power, Set wanted that power, right? So what he did was he had this like competition. He kind of baited or brought Osiris in, and he said, hey, Osiris, guess what? I had this really cool sarcophagus made. And this sarcophagus, there's no way that you're taller than this sarcophagus. He gets really tricky. So Osiris says, yes, I am. They go back and forth. So Set eventually talks Osiris into getting in to the sarcophagus. Then he gets in. Osiris says, I'm going to prove this to you. No worries. He gets in. Set locks the sarcophagus, and then he throws it in the river. And Osiris goes flowing down that Nile River, or kind of up the Nile River, right? Now, Set says, oh, great. Guess who's in charge now? Me. I'm going to take the power. Here's my crown, and that's what I'm going to do. Well, this did not work well at all, because eventually what was found was Osiris, the sarcophagus was found. It was brought up, okay, in this myth, this story. And here's Osiris, but Set thought, oh no, I'm too nervous. He can't be around. So he unfortunately took parts of Osiris and put them all over the Egyptian desert. Now, thankfully, Osiris had a very, very dutiful wife and a sister who walked all over this upper Egypt, which you see down here, which is funny, and lower Egypt, which is up here, following the path of the Nile River, picking up these different parts of Osiris. Then what they did, this is a site, this is the two, Isis is his wife, this is her sister. They walk up, they gather all of the pieces of Osiris, guys, and then guess what? They put him back together, okay, with the help of the god Anubis. Now, Anubis becomes, in the afterlife, an escort, a person that's taking someone from their time on earth into this afterlife, okay? So he becomes a really, really important god. Now, you can see here, Osiris is bound up because all of the different parts of Osiris were all over the place, right? They actually depict him with his legs together, wrapped up as if we see in a mummy, right? With linen wrappings. Now, this is very different than how we typically see gods. Now, even though we always see ancient Egyptians mostly in a formal position, meaning in profile, like you see here, just sides of their bodies, you can tell that they're walking. That's never the case for Osiris. So if you're looking at something, right, you can always tell Osiris, not just by how he might be different in the idea that his feet are bound, but we can also see his skin, right? It's green. So that's another way that we can really, really point him out. And that's where we get that connection to the mummy and the idea of him being the guard of the afterlife. Okay, so we see right here on this image from the Book of the Dead, which we've talked about before. Who can tell me, who is this god? We just talked about him lightly. Can you give me a suggestion in our chat box? Remind me, who is this god here with the jackal head on top? Good suggestion. It's Anubis. Good job. It is Anubis. So you can see here, Anubis is taking the hand of the individual who the ancient Egyptians depicted as the person that just passed. This god is taking this individual's soul through the 3 tests ancient Egyptians believed they had to walk through and pass to be able to get into this eternal bliss they referred to as the afterlife. And can you guys tell me, we have 2 other gods here, which are our kind of our god that's taking count. We have our devourer, which we'll talk about. And then we also have our sun god here. Tell me, who is this guy right here? Can you tell me really quick? Remind me of his name. In our chat box, you guys can throw that in there. So we have Anubis carrying the soul, the escort, through the test. Hopefully they'll pass. Then we go through Anubis and we see Osiris, right? Now Osiris, they say, it's basically there would be this door here. And ancient Egyptians believed Osiris was guarding that door. If you pass these tests, like it looks like our friend did here, that means you're going to go there. You're going to have an eternal field of wheat. You're never going to be hungry. If you were sick, guess what? There in that afterlife, you're going to be better. You in some way had an ailment, an illness during your time on earth, or maybe you were even of an older age, the moment you walk past Osiris and he allows you in, that means you're going to live the best version of you, healthiest, strongest, best you there could be. And you'll do that for eternity. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed, but right here, who stands behind Osiris is actually his wife and her sister. So that gives you a little bit more information about the gods you might typically see. Now, remember, guys, ancient Egyptians were really, really dedicated, so dedicated to getting into the afterlife that they woke up every day preparing, being good to one another, making sure that they also were able to bring things with them, because they actually thought you could have this connection where you would bring things to the afterlife. That's why they were buried with different objects and asked their families and their friends to come and leave offerings at their tombs, because they believed a spirit would be able to retrieve them and keep them connected to that person that's in the afterlife, and that person in the afterlife connected to the world of the living, right? Their family and friends that are left behind. Now, there are 2 main spirits that we're going to talk about. And the reason we're going to talk about them is because ancient Egyptians, remember, didn't think this was just an instant ticket in. Oh, here, you get to go past Osiris. No, 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 no. They had to make sure you were worthy. Can you guys remind me? Wouldn't that get boring after a while? I guess it could. I bet you it could get boring after a while to have a blissful life where you were always healthy, always well. But I guess it's something to put faith into. But can you guys remind me really, really quick, what is it to go past those tests? What is being judged in our very final test before you can pass by Osiris? Can you guys give me a reminder in the chat box? If you don't know, that's okay too. You can give me a suggestion. What are we testing? Yes, Gabby, so good. We are testing the heart, right? Ancient Egyptians actually thought how you lived every day, your good and your bad deeds, they were tracked on your heart. Now, they call your heart your soul. And they believed your soul, what they called your soul, wasn't just a part of your body. They actually thought that there were 5 different spirits that made up your soul. And that's what was really being judged in tracking your good and bad deeds. Now, these 2 spirits, Ka and Ba, ancient Egyptians believed had 2 roles. One that required them to stay with them every single day, help people getting through their time on earth. And then in the afterlife, the role of these two spirits is to keep everybody connected to the world of the living that is past that afterlife. Now, Ka spirit, guys, is not actually this male figure. Ka spirit is represented by the symbol we see on the male figure's head, okay? Now, I want you guys to try to do something for me. If you're willing and if you're at home and you want to get silly, I want you guys to put an action to Ka. I want you guys to make a hieroglyph Ka with your body. And then I want you guys on the count of 3, we're going to scream that word Ka. If you can't scream, I understand. I might get in trouble with my neighbors. You will be able to put caps locks on and you can put Ka, spell out Ka in the chat box. Show me that energy, okay? 1, 2, 3. Scream Ka! Or put it in. Good job, Gabriella. Yes, Owen, good job. Show me that energy. Gabby, good job. Now, the reason I'm asking you guys to do that is because the ancient Egyptians believed the Ka spirit was their energy. Good job, Erin, all that energy you guys are showing me. Good job, Charlie and AJ and Owen again. The ancient Egyptians believed that the Ka spirit, when a baby was first born, it would take its first breath. The Ka spirit would enter their body and stay with them each day to give them energy through the day. Now, in the afterlife, ancient Egyptians thought that the Ka had to stay in the tomb. Now, what's interesting though is that not only does it have to stay in the not only did it have to stay in the tomb, the ancient Egyptians believed it actually had to return to its eternal resting place, which happens to be the dried out, preserved body of the mummy. Now, ancient Egyptians also believed in this other spirit called Ba, all right? Now, Ba spirit, a little bit different. It didn't have to stay in the tomb, but first, remember, it had to live with you during your time on earth. And the best way to explain Ba, you do not have to do any actions unless you want to get active. You can flap your wings a little bit. The ancient Egyptians actually believed Ba was your personality, right? What made you unique. Just like all of us have personalities that make us unique. Now, with the body of a bird, though, guys, don't worry. Ba is not staying in the tomb all day, every day. Instead, Ba can go anywhere during daylight hours. It can go to the beach, the jungle. It could go to an iceberg, anywhere it wants to go to explore. But just like us, Ba and Ka kind of like have a bedtime or a curfew, if you will. The ancient Egyptians believed the moment the sun started to set, Ba and Ka needed to come together in the tomb of the mummy. And then each night, guys, they had to lay to rest in that preserved body. Now, I'm going to walk through this whole process with you. And the whole time we walk through it, our one goal is to not change the appearance of the mummy. The reason we're going to work to remove all of this water from the body of my friend, Mr. Penn, we are going to do that to make sure he stays preserved, okay? And the reason that is because mummification, while very scientific, is a spiritual practice. That's why people that are put in charge of it, mummy makers, who are also ancient embalmers, are actually elevated to the level of priest. So it goes pharaohs and priests are really, really close behind pharaohs in that social pyramid. Now, reminding you guys though, right? We have about over 3,270 years of history. So let's start right here. Let's kind of jump all the way back in time at the beginning, or what we documented at the beginning of ancient Egyptian history, 3,300 BCE. Now, imagine we're all in the desert, right? And I have a glass of water. I take a sip of it. I put it in the sand dunes. Somehow I forget it and I leave it there all day. Can you guys tell me what would eventually happen to the water in my glass if it's there all day? What would eventually happen to the water in that glass? Yes, good job, guys. It would evaporate. Absolutely. It's going to turn into a gas. And guess what? That's how our very first mummies in this area are made. Now, at the beginning of ancient Egyptian civilization, remember, guys, they're still building their society. So all of the individuals in 3300 BCE, most of them are farmers. So when someone passes away, friends and family take them into the sand dunes, away from that Nile River. They dig a shallow pit in the sand. They place objects of the deceased person's daily life. And then, naturally, after that pit and the body has been laid to rest in the pit covered with sand, all of the water that makes up the body naturally evaporates. This is one of the 13 ancient Egyptian mummies we have in our at the Penn Museum. She is our only example of a mummy that was made naturally through the evaporation process. Now, remember, guys, she was living way before there were pharaohs. That's what we call pre-dynastic, okay? But we can still learn from her. We can learn more about the how they were making pottery. We know a lot about her through our physical anthropologists, those that study bones to help us learn about the past and through their remains. Now, you guys talked about pharaohs. So think about this. We're talking King Tut, right? If you guys were all pharaohs, do any of you guys want an eternal resting place as a shallow pit in the sand, right? Just like this. Anybody, would you guys want that for you as pharaohs? Yeah, lots of suggestions of no, 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 nope. I agree, right? Most people, especially if you're a ruler, right? Typically, no thanks. I like that too, right? Most people, right? Those pharaohs, they were thinking the same thing. They said, hey, I need something way more fancy, way more glitzy, way more Kardashian, right? So what we start seeing are pyramids that are operating as tombs. Now, their plan did work, guys. We know a lot about ancient Egyptian history by what's been discovered in this tomb. And the pharaohs got to bring a lot with them to the afterlife, let me tell you. But what we do really see, okay, is that the ego of the pharaohs actually got in the way. The moment that we actually step inside these stone pyramids, we see that there's an environment change. So these are some pictures from my friend that actually shared them with me. They're what it looks like inside the tombs. So once we walk into this stone structure, automatically, guys, it's cooler. And because it's cooler, that means that the environment traps water. You can see that right here. That's a gleam. So it's almost more humid than it is hot and dry like it is outside of the tomb. Now that presents a problem because with trapping water, that means natural evaporation is impossible. So ancient Egyptians have to adapt. They create a job for a mummy maker to actually create mummies with their hands through a 3-step process. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to walk through those 3 steps. Now, my friends, this word artificial typically means fake, but when we put these 2 words together, artificial mummy, in the context of archaeology, what that means is that the mummy we might be reading about, talking about, referencing is a mummy that wasn't made naturally through evaporation. Instead, it was a mummy that was dried and preserved by the hands of a human, okay? Now, let's jump into this idea of mummy making. You guys did such a good job. So these are my friends here. This is Mr. Penn. Everyone can say hi to Mr. Penn. He's at the museum right now. I was saying earlier to Miss Malley, I introduced him as a dummy. That is not because I think he's dumb. He's my best friend, but he literally comes from Hollywood. He is a fabricated like mannequin that is supposed to look realistic. Now, right under here, oh guys, I know that he would love hearing all of you say hi. I miss him so. Now, right under here, because Mr. Penn, I couldn't put him on my back and take him out of the museum with me because I didn't know I wasn't going to be able to go back. Thankfully, in archaeology, we do a whole bunch of experiments. So right down here last year, there was a fish at the Reading Terminal Market that we decided to do an experiment about mummification to understand more about the process and the different materials. This is Harold the fish, and last year, Miss Emily, my friend, and I actually mummified him. Well, Miss Emily did a lot of the work. Oh yes, it is a fish, don't worry. It does look real. Harold the fish passed away of natural causes prior, or natural causes of what comes to getting a fish in the supermarket, right? So what we're going to do is see how us as archaeologists break down these ancient materials, ancient methods by doing science experiments. So we're going to talk about mummification and the 3 big steps using our friends Mr. Penn and Harold the fish. Okay, so now we know our friends. Can you guys tell me right here, it would be on our left, on my left, and right here on your right. Which of these 2 figures do you think is the mummy maker? Go ahead and tell me, on the left or on the right? Good job, Gabriella. And then as you guys are putting that into the chat box, what happened to the fish? The fish was in the supermarket, so they said that he wasn't harmed. Don't worry, but we purchased him at the supermarket, but it was fresh that day. Good job, guys. Right. Good. So it's the person on the right. Okay. Very, very good. You can see mummy makers actually identified themselves by what they wore. They wore special hats. Or actually even had their hair in some cases shaved to be a certain way. They would use a specific cheetah pelt over their shoulder, a way to signify who they were. Remember, not everyone's reading and writing. And then you can also see these tools. Now, I also think it's fun to point out, guys, you can see a linen kilt here, and these are sandals and some jewelry as well. So these are different ways people kind of understood who somebody was by what they wore when not everybody could read and write. So let's see, let's get started. Now, here's the thing. Our goal, Mr. Penn, we have to keep Mr. Penn and Harold the fish preserved. That means we want to try to remove all of the water to make sure his body doesn't break down. Now, to understand why that's important is because most of our body is made of water. It's over 70% made of water, okay? Now, if we keep the water in our body, it's going to break down. The example I like to give is a pumpkin. If anyone is like me and has seen a pumpkin that's been left out a day or 2 too long, we see that pumpkin starts changing. Can you guys give me some suggestions? How does a pumpkin change if it's left out too long? Can you guys give me some suggestions? Like maybe it looks a little different. Can you give me some examples of how that might be different? It's mushy. Absolutely. That hard texture is mushy. It rots. Absolutely. What are some ways we know it's rotting? Oh, moldy. Absolutely. It's mushy, the texture. It's moldy if you want to peek through those little eyes of the jack-o'-lantern, or even if you might see that growing if you didn't carve into it. It shrivels up. Very good. It gets smaller in size. It smells horrible, by the way, guys. I don't know if any of you guys ever had to throw one out. It collapses, another example. And also, I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but after it collapses, it gets mushy. It changes color because of that mold. You might even see like pests or flies, or in my area, squirrels come up and start eating at it. I don't know why. It smells totally gross, right? Now, the reason that's really important to understand is because just like those pumpkins, just like our bodies, those pumpkins are more than half made of water. So if we don't work to preserve Mr. Penn properly through these 3 steps, he will actually start getting that texture change, that color change, the mold, a pest infestation, the same way that pumpkin starts to change. Okay, so yeah, when Gabriella said when you carve it for Halloween too early, absolutely. And I have done that before. I got so excited about a design once, and then I just saw my poor little kitty cat fall right off after a design. Just did it too early. So let's get started. Now, most of the water in our body actually lives in our organs, and our organs go from the top of our head to our waist area. Okay, now we have to take out one of the most watery organs there is in our body. So who can give me a suggestion? What organ am I thinking about taking out first? What organ am I thinking about? Ooh, a suggestion of liver. That's a good suggestion, but not the liver just yet. The stomach is another important organ, but not just yet. And then we had a suggestion of the lungs, another one. Don't worry, they're coming up. And then we got the brain. So there was a suggestion of the bladder, totally great suggestion. And then 2 suggestions of the brain. You guys are so good. It is actually the brain we have to take out first. If you guys can believe it, our brain is actually, for real life, 70% made of water. So drink your water today. A lot of it goes right up here to this essential organ. Now, can you guys give me a Imagine this was Mr. Penn with me. How am I going to get this organ out of Mr. Penn's body? Give me some suggestions. What am I going to do to get that brain, that watery, yucky brain out of there? Through his nose, you guys, so good. And then we have a suggestion of cut his head. I agree. I could do some brain surgery if I had the tools that we do in 2020, or if I were as an ancient mummy maker, I could just smash Mr. Penn's head with a rock, right? It would be such an easy process. Now, that's a really good suggestion, but unfortunately, I'm not able to open up his head. Can anybody give me a suggestion? Why can't I? It's a really good suggestion because it would save a lot of time, but why am I not allowed to hit Mr. Penn's head or cut open his head like was suggested? What do you guys think? Or do you guys remember? We're not allowed to do that for a very specific reason. Because we want to keep him intact. Yes, it's not preserving him. Good job, Gabby. It's not preserving him. If we don't preserve him, then our spirits, our Ba and our Ka, wouldn't recognize their eternal resting place. So that's why we're going to go through the nose, which was suggested. Good job. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but ancient Egyptians actually thought that their brain was junk. Oh, good job. Okay, so we have a friend who just said you need a brain hook and you need it to use it to take a brain out through their nose. Very, very good. Now, we are exactly going to do this, but guess what? Ancient Egyptians, they actually thought that brain was junk. Everything we know our heart does, our brain does, they believed your heart did. But if you look at how all of us are biologically built, we actually have two barriers that protect this important organ. What that means is if my finger was super long and super skinny, I couldn't put it up my nose and touch my brain, right? Thankfully, something stops it from that. So what we actually have to do is break through the first barrier, which we can all feel on our nose. So if you guys want to, you can put your finger right on your nose here. And you can feel that's a little bit wiggly, but if you press down, what you're going to feel is called your septum bone. Now, your septum bone starts pretty small, but as you get to your eyes, like right around your eyes, it gets much bigger. I have to break this as an ancient mummy maker through with a very, very, very advanced form of technology, guys. A stick. So you can see my friend Miss Ellen here is using a stick. This is exactly how the mummy makers would do it. They would put that big stick right up to Mr. Penn's septum. Remember, he's passed away, so it's not going to hurt him. They'll channel their Ka spirit, and then all of a sudden, bam, you hit that nose with the stick. Okay. Now, the second barrier. The second barrier, though, is actually something that does bring in that second tool you guys have been talking about. Now, this second barrier is called your ethmoid bone. If you guys can believe it, that lives basically lying down in between your two eyebrows. It's like about an inch in length. So that's what we're going to do to use that brain hook. We are going to wiggle through that broken septum because that stick's not going to help us. Because even though this is a really small part of the body, a really small bone, it's one of the strongest parts of the body. So the stick can't help. Instead, we're going to use another metal object that today we call a brain hook. So very, very good, guys, that named the brain hook. Now, and also, good job, Aaron. I'm getting to that. Good job. Aaron talked about how we're going to get this out. Now, here's the thing. First off, this sounds crazy, what I'm talking about. And in archaeology, you don't take any theory. You don't use theory. Instead, what we want is evidence. So what we have right here in this blue picture, it's actually an X-ray of a brain hook inserted through the nose of a mummy. What this shows us, what it gives us is visual evidence. Right here, you can see the broken septum. Remember, we hit that with the stick. That's why it looks all really broken up there. Then right here, as we learn new information, what this looks like when it enters the body, we see our second barrier is broken, that ethmoid bone right here. Now, the coolest thing this confirms is that there is actually no brain here. So we know this is actually what happened. Now, as archaeologists, we have our evidence. But as ancient mummy makers, we have an issue. Our brain is a solid mass. That means it's all connected. I can't just put this in Mr. Penn's nose and pull his brain out with one pull. I have to do more work than that. Now, just like our friend said, just like our friend Aaron said that you would have to put this hook up the nose and then we might have to whisk it. It's going to get a little gross, but it's absolutely true. Now, here's the thing. I actually recorded a video of us to help you guys understand how we're going to get this solid mass of a brain right out of the quarter-size hole we've made on Mr. Penn's face. Now, I was lucky enough to be able to make this video with a Jello brain, but Jello is 70% made of water, so I thought it was a really good example for you guys. Now, I'm going to show you this video. It is cherry in color. I love to make it realistic. I'm going to tap it here and yell out, or I'm sorry, not yell out. Go ahead and write. How do you write how it's moving? So we do have some questions about the idea of how this happens. So it's wiggling, it's jiggling, and as you can see here, remember, we're mummy makers. So like our friend suggested, that idea of a whisk or the whisking motion you might use to break up eggs if you like to eat them for a breakfast, or if you watch baking shows. I watch a lot of Nailed It. That's the only thing my daughter tells me I can be on. We're going to use that same motion. Now, our friend, actually, Aaron, you did a really, really good job. The goal here is that this is about 20 seconds of an example. In all reality, a mummy maker would spend a really long time scrambling up this brain. The more they scramble, the more it actually breaks down and becomes a liquid. Now, the more liquefied it is means we'll take Mr. Penn, and you can see me down here, and you'll put him to like a 45-degree angle. That way, we'll actually allow gravity to help pull out all of the liquefied brain, and then we would throw it out just like junk. Now, we had another question in this is, does the blood come out? Absolutely, it does. So I will not be showing any of the blood gore part here. This is as gory as it gets with the Jello brain video, but the blood was definitely a part of it. It wasn't drained. It was part of the process. So they would be getting their hands dirty, quite literally. Okay, and don't worry, guys. Harold's brain came out too. So Mr. Penn, we wiggled it out, we threw it out, and Harold, we're following that same process. Remember, we're doing our science experiment. Now we're on step 2, evisceration. Huge word, but what that really means is that we need to take the center organs below our shoulders and above our waist out of Mr. Penn's body. Now, if I have to be really careful about how I'm kind of moving about because I don't want to change Mr. Penn's appearance, can you guys give me a suggestion? What would you think I would have to do to be able to try to remove these organs from the center of Mr. Penn's body? What would I have to do? You can give me any suggestion you'd like. Think about what we might do, or even if you know it, you might know already what we're going to do. Go ahead and give me a suggestion in your chat box, in the chat box. I think I got all of the questions too. So for evisceration, no, don't worry. You don't need to throw up. I promise that that is as big, as gory as it gets. Yes, so we want to open up his body. And the way that we're going to do that is by making one single cut. We're going to make a single cut from the rib to the belly button. And we have to use a very specific material. Our specific material can't be metal because they didn't have the technology to make a really heavy tool like a knife that would be really sharp today. Instead, we are going to have to remove all these next set of organs with obsidian. So you guys know I'm a Minecrafter. I think I tell you all the time I'm a gamer. I always go back to Minecraft, even though I play a lot of different video games. Now, in Minecraft, hopefully all of you guys have been able to get obsidian. If anyone is a Minecrafter, tell me how do we get obsidian? How do we make it ourselves in the game? I love Roblox too, Gabriella. How do we make that in the brain? In the brain. How do we make that in the game of Minecraft? Oh yes, the diamond pickaxe. Yes, Owen, I love my diamond pickaxe. And if anybody doesn't know yet and you haven't made it yet, you can use lava and water. Lava and water is going to be what makes obsidian both in the game and naturally. Now, what we do is we actually know that ancient Egyptians traded with the ancient Middle East, Mesopotamia, for obsidian. They would chop it down, not with a diamond pickaxe. They would sharpen it to its finest point because it would make such a good cut that it's actually obsidian scalpels continue to be made. Now, we have to go, now that we've made a cut right here on Mr. Penn's stomach, just like this, we are going to have to find 4 organs. We are going to remove them and we're going to save them. So can you guys remind me, what are the 4 organs? We talked about some of them already. What 4 organs do I have to remove from Mr. Penn to save and put on the side? Okay, the heart's an important one, but we don't want to remove that one. What are some, okay, so lungs, good. What are some other suggestions? So lungs, we have heart, we have lungs, kidneys, lungs, heart, stomach, liver, all really good suggestions, guys. Very, very good. I always like to say we're going to remove them all, really, but the ones that we're going to keep are what I call the ills organs, okay? That's your intestines, your liver, your lungs, good job, guys, and your stomach, okay? Now, the ills organs are so important that they're removed from the body, they're dried out, and they're placed in special jars. Does anyone want to tell me, it doesn't matter about spelling, does anyone know the name of those special jars that we want to preserve these organs in? It's okay if you don't. I just know some of you guys really like ancient Egypt and mummification, so I want to give you guys an opportunity. Good job, it is. So what we're going to put these ills organs in, we are specifically going to be putting them in, here's Mr. Penn's removed and Harold's removed. Canopic jars. Very, very good, guys. Now, the canopic jars are what preserve the organs. These canopic jars hold the ills organs, which you can see all are in shapes of gods. The 4 gods that are actually brothers, they are said to protect these organs in the afterlife. And these jars are left in the tombs, not in the coffin of the mummy, but next to it, as a way of making sure that this is kind of an offering for them and also that form of protection. Now, I won't be done eviscerating Mr. Penn, no matter how many canopic jars he gets to have in his tomb, right? Because you can have as many as you'd like based on your wealth and as decorated as you'd like. But I also have not done my work. I'm going to remove all of these excess organs. I'm going to throw them out like junk, just like the brain. That bladder, it's getting thrown out. The gallbladder, those kidneys, they're getting thrown out too. The pancreas is getting thrown out. And that heart, you guys did such a good job talking about, is so important. It actually stays in the body. The only organ that remains in the body. Now, this brings us to our last step, which is called desiccation. And this is the longest step of all, okay? Now, desiccation means to dry out. And an example here is grapes and dried out grapes, or desiccated grapes, also known as raisins. Can you guys give me some examples in the chat box? How do they look different? Good job. Thanks, Aaron, for starting it off. So Aaron said that they look different because one has wrinkles, right? So this is that smooth texture, and over here it's nice and wrinkly. So what are some other, young and old? Gabriella, great. Somebody thinks that this may mean young and this maybe looks a little bit old. I guess that idea of the wrinkles. One is smaller. Good job, Owen. So we have these big, plump, juicy grapes. And then over here, we have really, really small raisins. They're dried out, and the color, great. You can see here in the grapes, look guys, it's purple, it's red, it's yellow, it's green. And then over here, we're really just seeing that predominant dark purple. Really, really good. Yeah, raisins are just dried grapes. I always like to say that raisins are kind of like the grape mummies, because they're just preserved grapes. Their taste changes a little bit, in my opinion, too. Okay, great. So you guys, awesome, awesome. The reason this becomes really important, because ancient Egyptians know, hey, we don't just have water in our organs. We know water lives under our skin. We're living in a desert. We're working in a desert. No strangers to sweat. So what they want to do is actually pull the last bit of water that goes under our skin and pops out through our pores. They're going to use a natural absorbent to pull out the rest of the water in the body. It's about 60% of the body in our water. Of the water that makes up our body is kind of what's underneath our skin. So they do this with a natural resource called natron. This is a picture of ours. You can see stand right here. We're standing on a lake bed that actually dried up. That's how natron actually forms in the desert. You can see the desert back there. Now, a mummy maker student would find this in Egypt. This is something that's naturally occurred for all of time. They would rake up enough of this natron, bring it back to the ceremonial mummification place. And then guys, for 60 days, Mr. Penn's body is dried out. Now, he has so much wealth, he can get a fresh layer of natron each day. Now, that wasn't typical for everybody. But here's the thing. Guess what we found out? I love all this talk about the idea of the grapes because, guys, guess what we found out in our experiment? We learned that you can actually make natron yourself. So if you guys want to take a grape or a piece of vegetable or even a piece of an apple I've done before, and you can actually create natron using table salt, so 1 part table salt, and then 3 parts of baking soda. Now, when I say 1 part versus 3 parts, what that means is it's kind of based on the size and the weight of your experiment. So if I was to do a grape or a slice of an apple, I would do 1 tablespoon of salt and 3 tablespoons of baking soda. But with Harold the fish, we needed to use much more than that. We were going more toward the cups. And I have a little lesson, Miss Mally and Miss Katie, that I will send to you so you guys can do this at home if you'd like. Now, here is Harold. You guys can see he has his Ills organs out here. Those Ills organs would also be dried in natron. You can see he's ready to go. We're mixing up his natron in the over here. Now, Mr. Penn is dried out for 60 days. Harold, we left in this for about 2 months, okay? So he was obviously a little bit smaller than Mr. Penn. Now, let's check him out, guys. Oh, I like that we're getting some ooh grossness because, guys, it's true. It doesn't smell very good. I promise that. And you can see here, they are completely dried out. They're kind of looking like human raisins on Mr. Penn's end. And over here with Harold the fish, I think he still looks pretty handsome, Harold the fish. So hopefully you guys think I did a good job. And our last step is just making sure that we protect. Yeah, it does. It smells. Do not use a fish at home, guys. No Tupperware container large enough. That's what I found out. So what we want to do now is we want to protect the body. We're going to use a natural resource called resin as almost like a saran wrap. It's heated, it gets waxy like a candle, and it's rubbed all over the body to keep the skin attached to the bones. We also are going to wrap up the mummy. We're going to use flax to make linen, okay? So right here gives you a better example. We would put resin all over the body like you see Harold. We then would wrap up the first layer of linen wrappings. Now, you guys can see this is the first layer here, and this is 1 layer for Mr. Penn. Do you guys think that's enough? Do you guys think that this would be enough for thousands and thousands of years? Yeah, no way, right? Nope, no way. Instead, we know that there's actually 25 layers of linen wrapping wrapped up around mummies. And on all 25 layers, you actually find amulets within the wrapping. Now, someone like Mr. Penn and the pharaohs, they had 100 amulets per layer. So you can see so many. And some, they may not have the wealth to be able to have 100 amulets placed in their wrappings, honoring all of these different gods and goddesses. So they would use the heart scarab. That's what they would save up for. Now, the heart scarab is actually on the first layer of linen wrappings. It's placed right over the area where the heart remains in the body. Now, when we translate these in hieroglyphs, what we find out is that this is a magical spell written in hieroglyphs, and it asks an individual's heart to be light. Who can tell me why, or remind me, because you guys are so good, why in the world would I want my heart to be light? Why would I want a magical amulet to ask my heart to be light and have this included in my linen wrappings? Who can give me a suggestion? Yes, to pass the test. Good job, guys. We need to pass this test of the weighing of the heart. Remember, Anubis is going to be able to escort you to your final test, where the ancient Egyptians believed your heart, tracking all of your good and bad deeds, would be placed on a balancing scale and balanced against the feather of truth, a feather given to us by a goddess, representing ultimate truth and ultimate wisdom. What you would want is for your heart to weigh evenly with the feather of truth. If it weighs evenly, that means the mistakes you made in your life, not so bad. Osiris would open that door and you could have so much fun in that afterlife. However, if it weighed heavier, it would actually be thrown to the devourer named Amut, made of the three of most feared animals in all of ancient Egypt, a crocodile, a lion, and a hippopotamus. This devourer would gobble your heart. Ancient Egyptians believed it would force you into a second death and your Ba and Ka would cease to exist. That's why this heart scarab is kind of like an insurance policy. It wipes away your bad mistakes to make sure you can always, always pass this test and never meet the fate of Eager Amut. So you guys are asking some good questions. I'm going to stop sharing, okay? Because you guys, we are getting toward the end of our lesson, and I really appreciate all of your attention. And I want to make sure that I take some time for questions. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box. And it looks like I think I tried to get them all during our lesson. So just as a confirmation, one of our friends is saying, they would go to the afterlife, and a really good association to that, for if it's for you personally, might be something considered like a heaven, where they would meet their ancestors. That would kind of be all dependent on the individual. So the afterlife is ancient Egyptians believed was just like your life on earth, but better. So it's kind of like having the best day you ever had when living over and over and over again. And then getting eaten by the monster is definitely that idea of an other world or the underworld. So it does have those connections. So that's a good job. Some comments from our friends in the chat box. I agree. So we have one of our friends said that Amut is kind of cute, and guess what? It is a mythical beast that carries a lot of weight. But what's really funny is that we do see through our animal mummies, which I know some of us chatted about before, we do actually see crocodiles being mummified, and almost like a cult pop up in honor of that devourer. So really good. I think that she's kind of cute too, but not so much her purpose. What do I think it was like in the afterlife? So I think that each person today has a different idea about what makes their day really wonderful. So I hope that no matter what in the afterlife, that everybody is able to live together in harmony, that everyone has enough to eat, that everyone has the same access to education, and that everyone is friendly to each other. So that's what I hope the afterlife looked like. But I heard that the ancient Egyptians said that it was like a field of wheat, a blissful field of wheat, where there was just endless amounts of the wheat that they would grow and need for their communities. We have a question, is Amut a he or a she? Amut is a she. The female devourer. So Miss Katie or Miss Mally, did I miss any questions? I think I got them all.
I think you got them all, which is awesome. You're so good at that. It's being able to do the chat and the PowerPoint and the demonstration. That's all that was. I thought it was a he as well, actually. I really did, Gabriella. I thought Amut was a he.
Yes, yeah. It looks like a masculine creature, but it is a she. We could dive into that more, but I don't think I will.
I don't think we will. Yeah. So, boys and girls, that was absolutely awesome. Oh, Charlie and AJ want to know, what's your favorite mummy?
Oh, my favorite mummy is actually one in our artifact lab. The reason that he is my favorite is because he was mummified with his puppy. And my second favorite is you can see the toes pop out of the linen wrappings at the end. And I would never do it, but I always think that that's like so cool. It's really, you don't ever unwrap a mummy. So in the cases of seeing the toes, sometimes it helps me it helps me remember a little bit about how connected we all are. And then there's one child mummy, and I got to see an X-ray of underneath their wrapping, and she wears this beautiful little bracelet. So those are the three that come to my mind.
Wow.
Right
And
away.
Charlie and AJ want to know, who's your favorite Egyptian god?
Oh, well, just in case any of them are listening, I love them all equally. But my favorite, I think my favorite would have to be Hathor, because she's the god of mother of like childbirth and mothers. So that would be something I find really interesting. And I also love her blue hair, and that she's connected to um the cows and fun stuff like that. And then I also think, if we think of the Hall of Judgment, I think Anubis would be one of my favorite gods, because his job is to be the escort taking you to the tests. So I think that would be an interesting god. If I could speak to, I would definitely want to talk to Anubis.
Awesome. And that's Aaron's as well. So we've learned a lot about Amut. So, and then who's your favorite Greek god? That's an interesting question, because we haven't gone down that path.
My favorite Greek goddess is Persephone. She is the daughter of of what we could consider Mother Nature. And she has a pretty interesting story where she actually has to become the wife of Hades. And she eats 7 pomegranate seeds, and this really, really big story about why she's there, and that her mother in charge of all of Earth starts having everything become winter. And eventually Zeus has to go to Hades and say, this is enough. Persephone needs to come back. She never really wanted to be there anyway. And they made a deal, because she ate 7 pomegranate seeds for 7 months. She has to go and live with Hades to be the kind of the queen of the underworld, his bride. And then for Miss Allison can do math. She promises the 6 months he comes back, and is able to be with her mother, which is kind of the representation of spring into summer. So Persephone is my favorite. But another one of my favorites is, I think it has to be Diana, the goddess of the huntress. I just think I am really attracted to her artworks.
Yeah, we need Greek information too, and we just will run out of time. But at Connected North, like the regular Connected North, we do have a lot of classes that look for those Greek and Roman programs. Yeah, so hopefully you can ask your teacher about that. So. Yeah.